Well, hello, my friends. Here we are again. This is the Oneness Project, and this is Sharon, of course, and I am Steve, and you are you, and we are the Oneness Project. First of all, I'd like to thank all that have subscribed and hit the like button and the comments down on the bottom. Awesome. Keep that going. Keep this algorithm going. Let's spread this wonderful message of living in a peace that I think we all strive for. I know we all strive for. Everyone strives for a form of peace. Today, we've been talking about it quite lengths already. I think probably about 2 hours we've talked about this. In the beginning, it almost seemed like Sharon and I had a disagreement about this. Ooh, wow. But as always, it seems it comes to a, so if not an agreement, still a flow. And maybe that's kind of what we're kind of getting to here. We've talked about what is peace, and I know in my life that, and I know that I watch on television, and when I've been told to me what has been told to me in schools by my parents and by society in general, for the most part, it appears that people believe in masses, majority, that peace is happiness. I've heard you might have heard the term, I just want to be happy. And most people will go, yeah, well, that makes sense. Makes sense. We want to be happy. Yeah, it makes sense. Or live happily ever after. We've heard that in marriage. Is happiness peace, though? Is that where we find our peace and happiness? Seems like an odd question, doesn't it? But it's one that I've had to ponder quite a bit since I've come to this understanding of oneness, because I know I've strived for happiness my whole life. And I know that looking back on it, I don't think there was much time I was in peace doing so. So maybe not. Sharon, what do you think about this? Is there peace and happiness?
You're going to be surprised at my answer, but I'm going to say yes, because peace is always present. You're never separated from who you are, and you are everything. Okay? Everything is in mind, and you're experiencing mind at all times. What I think saying or asking if you can be in or experiencing peace at the same time you're experiencing maybe sadness, I don't agree with that. You can experience one or the other, happiness, sadness, or peace. Now, I'm going to go back to the Garden of Eden just to make my point. For many of our listeners probably are Christians and know about the story of Adam and Eve in the garden where everything was perfect. They were at perfect peace, right? And then they got kicked out of the garden. The challenge that we have is knowing the way back to the garden. Okay, so metaphorically, we have been kicked out of peace or out of the Garden of Eden. Now the question is, how do we get back? And so we've gotten lost. But as another metaphor, I would like to draw a line. Okay, here is a line. On one end of this spectrum is good or unhappiness or negative, positive. And on the other end is negative experiences. But in the middle is peace. Okay? Now, we are always on somewhere along this line of the experience of life. Okay, we're always experiencing some part of this, but for many of us, I know for me personally, I didn't know how to get back to the neutral state. So positive, negative, and neutral. I was either in a negative state or a positive state, meaning I was either suffering or I was happy. But I didn't know how to get back into peace. And I think the goal, as Steve and I probably agree, is not to experience, is not to go after any of these states permanently, right? It's not to say I want to be permanently on the happy side of this spectrum, or I want to permanently be on the negative side, or even on the peace side. Okay. It's just knowing that the spectrum is there and it is to be fully experienced. But the challenge, I believe, Steve, is that because we've been kicked out of the center, out of the neutral position, which is peace, we have gotten so lost on either side of it that and we don't know the way back. So we have found in this oneness message that the oneness message or the oneness understanding is the way back to peace. Did I go off subject, by the way?
No. I don't think so. No. And I just to go further with that, this neutral position, as we would say, I found now looking back on it that when I was striving for happiness, that the neutral position, being in a neutral position, was almost non-existent. It meant that I was not where I was in my peace, that I was always trying to stay in that happiness state, and anything that was not happy turned quickly into stress, anxiety, all of those things like that. Then it would get to the point where for a moment I would find this happiness in this place, and that place would not make me happy anymore. So I would be like going into, we call it boredom, I suppose. Happiness, a place of happiness, any place that we could find. We find this with people that try to be happy with wealth. We get a car, we get this. That car will eventually just be a car. It will bring you excitement and all of those things like that, but eventually it will just be a car. Some of the most wealthy people I've known were some of the most miserable people I've ever known. And all they talked about was how they were going to make themselves happy the next tomorrow or the next day. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that's where I was. If happiness is the idol, or what we want to call peace, we will constantly be striving for more happiness, because happiness in itself is not sustainable. It will eventually become, we need a new experience. However, with the oneness understanding, as we say, I think we come to the realization that we're not trying to be neutral, or we're not trying to be negative, or we're not trying to be positive, so to speak. These are things that we're not striving for the thing. This is the thing. Experience is the thing. So we can experience negative emotions with the understanding that peace is right here.
Yes.
It's just right here. And we can go and be happy and excited and enjoy with the realization that peace is right here. That happiness is not the peace. Happiness The experience of all of those things, though, allows us to have the peace, because the contrast of those things create the peace. Now, take those things out and we simply live in peace. And there is religions or spirituality concepts that say that we are supposed to strive for this neutrality and live in that neutrality, that's peace. I can assure you now, if you do that, you're going to be bored out of your mind. And then bored is a negative emotion. So then how do we react to that negative emotion? If we react to that negative emotion in shame, or because if we're told, or we believe in our minds that one of these things is the goal, then we're going to have negative emotions come out when that doesn't supply us with what we are making it out to be, such as happiness. We're going to feel shame. We're going to feel, we were talking about before this, about religion has a tendency to do this, to make us believe that we're supposed to feel happiness all the time because we're supposed to believe God is good or whatever, correct? Like you, in
Yep.
Mormon religion, you kind of had that idea?
Yeah, I think that's right. Most religions, we're striving for a state in which we're permanently happy.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's no permanence in life. Life is a constant movement. Okay. So the idea of permanently in heaven, not that heaven is a bad thing or peace is a bad thing. It's just that they're not going to be happy being there permanent, to be at peace, being in peace, permanent way of saying it, but it's true. You're going to meet up on boredom, which is a real thing. You're going to experience good and evil, positive, negative, all those things. And that's what we're about. So the truth is, we need to just be at peace with the whole spectrum of life. Be at peace with our own personal expression of okay, but we talked about what we're taught in religion. We're taught to suppress the expression of negative feelings and only exhibit positive energy. And there's no peace in trying to do that.
The other thing we didn't even talk about this beforehand, but it's really good to go into this, because another thing I found in religion, for me, it was evangelical Christianity. What I found was when something tragic did happen, supposedly tragic, we went out of peace super quick and would act just totally erratic. Like it comes to some surprise that something outside of happiness would happen to us. Like, how could this happen? God is on our side. And then there would be like these huge, not huge, but then the speakers of the religious people would try to constantly bring us back to the fact that somehow we're happy here anyways. And, eventually we get that, right? Okay, have your grief. That's good. Okay, grief is okay. But like, don't stay there too long, right? Because God is good. So like, get over that part. And then we'll go back to happiness again. It was a mask. It was such a mask. The truth is, if we asked anybody in there, if we go one-on-one, I'm sure of it, very few people lived in a peaceful state. It was a mask of happiness, talking back and forth. And most people that go to those forms of will see through it pretty quick. that's outside of it. It's very apparent. And this happens. I don't want to just, sound like I'm slamming religion here or whatever. I mean, in general, the reason why we go to these places is because we're looking for that happiness. Why? Because in life in general, they're selling happiness as peace. This is why I kind of felt like doing this video. If you watch television, advertisers do not like peaceful people, people that know what peace is, because it doesn't sell well. If we can convince people that happiness is peace, you can sell stuff like crazy. They'll buy cars, they'll buy vacations, they'll buy clothes, buy everything. Here's your peace. It's over here, because happiness is peace, remember? So come over here, and we'll just strive and strive and strive. Advertisers know it well. For me, now, being in peace, choosing peace means that I have the ability to go back to peace at any time. And I have the ability to realize, as we've seen with Solomon, we've talked about that quite a bit with Ecclesiastes, is that everything is meaningless. Solomon talks about that in Ecclesiastes right away. Everything is meaningless. Now, Solomon sounded like he was like really upset about this idea, and maybe some of you who are listening here might be upset with that idea. In fact, I think as a humanity, we struggle mightily with this idea. But with the concept of the oneness of all things, where everything is eternal, I now look at it as everything is meaningless. I get out of peace, I guess you'd say, into excitement because of knowing this, that the experience is the purpose.
Yeah. I guess you could say the meaning of life is just to live it.
Experience.
Right? Yeah. If you want to give a meaning to life, it really is just to live it, to experience all of it.
Yeah.
And trying to resist or suppress a part of it, you're creating unhappiness, or you're going way outside of peace, and you'll be lost and not knowing the way back.
Yeah, happiness, striving for happiness can only in the end leave you in negative emotions. Most of the time, 90% of the time, and not being able and not finding peace. Now, with that will eventually bring us to peace eventually, but have it, like, I love the way Jesus said it, have peace within yourself, or love within yourself, so that we don't go as much as possible. We don't live in a constant state of torment to find our peace. There is a great contrast, but we don't need to strive for the torment. Just experiencing life as it is every single day, as we understand days now, and enjoying the experience. That's it. I mentioned when we were talking before, I knew a person in my past who lived like this all the time. She seemed to just understand this concept without ever saying it to anybody or having a philosophy about it. She seemed to just understand that she did whatever she was going to do that day. She understood that she was going to do what she desired in her life, and she wasn't going to do anything less than that. That the desires in her is what life was about. I never heard her once say, I'm going to go do this so I can accomplish this. There was no end to the accomplishment. It was always just to experience that thing. That was the purpose. I guess that's what we're really trying to say. Happiness suggests that there's an end, right? To happiness ever after means that there's nothing more than the happiness, or there's nothing less than the happiness. It is the purpose. It's like there's an end, but there is no end to the experience.
Yeah, and even though in the beginning I drew a line as if we're on this spectrum, we're living life on a spectrum, we're actually living life in a circle.
I suppose, yeah.
a spiraling circle that and pieces in the center of that. But it's funny. I when we were talking before, I keep thinking of the Garden of Eden. I don't know why in this discussion, but I said if I were to ask God, if God came to me now, I don't believe in a God, in an outside God. I believe God is right here. He's not anywhere. He's right there. He's everywhere. In fact, but if I believed in an outside God, and he would appear to me and say, "You have one wish, okay? I can grant you one wish right now. What would that be?" I would say, "I want to know the directions back to the Garden of Eden." Okay? You kicked me out without a roadmap. Okay? I want the map. I want to know how to get back to that beautiful Garden of Eden. And what I conclude his answer would be, because when I'm in his presence, I would be experiencing the Garden of Eden, metaphorically. But I think what he would do once I made that request was to kick me out again. Because actually, the way back to peace is to go through the full cycle of good and evil. Okay, it is to experience life in its fullness. And when there is no beginning and end in reality. But even if we think of life that way, we ought to experience everything along that spectrum. And we keep passing, I think, the middle path or the middle of that, the neutral state, without recognizing it, I think is probably what's happening.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah. We're passing it without recognizing it because it doesn't look like peace.
Exactly.
If our eyes are focused on, say, happiness, which seems to be the most common thing, when we pass peace, we don't recognize it because we think that peace is the happiness. And what happens if we put happiness as an idol? We end up living in fear most of the time. Because even when we accomplish this happiness, we're afraid of leaving it. Because inside we know that we can't stay there. It's going to change. And we're going to do everything we can to try to stay in this happiness. As soon as you're doing something to acquire peace, you're not in peace.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to accomplish happiness, it means you're doing something to either stay in it or get to it. And either way, you're out of it. The only thing you have is some forms of excitement or what have you. And then what it seems that in this consciousness, when we do this, we will reach for outside sources to try to live in some semblance of that happiness we desire, like food, alcohol, cars, whatever it may be.
Right?
Money. But when we understand the peace, now what we can do is we can almost test ourselves to leave the peace, to come back to the peace, to be able. It's like going, like I like the way you called it before we started talking about this. It's home. We leave the home to come back to the home. That can be in both ways. We grow a experience of where home is, so we can actually leave to go, and that's what we call exciting life. The reason why we said when this first started, we probably got to end here. I think the reason why marriages don't end well or end not being married,
some of them
doesn't marry, at a very high rate actually, is because again, we get married for if we're getting married for an experience, then we know that we can go out out both sides. There's going to be a negative experience and a positive experience as far as emotions are concerned. But those are just a contrast to the peace, and those are exciting. When we
Yeah.
look at that as an exciting aspect of life, then we can almost, and this is why we brought this up to begin with, through the negative sadness, there's almost like an excitement to it. Like it's not really sadness as much anymore as this anticipation that there's something coming on the other side. We know we're not going to stay there. But if we're searching for happiness as the goal, we feel that when we're not there, like we're never going to get out of it. We're never going to acquire it again. I did. I became a very negative person when I was doing that because it felt like I was never going to acquire it.
You know, Steve, I kind of am chuckling within myself as we're talking about this more, because even the analogy I just gave with me being in front of God, asking God how to get back to him, it's so silly. You know, here it is. God is right here saying, what do you want? And I'm saying, I want to come back to you. I'm right.
You're not actually leaving anywhere.
So the only thing he can do is to send me away from him.
Yeah.
You know, we have gotten so lost in the lone and dreary world, you might call it, that it's funny when you can see it from the perspective of oneness. It really becomes humorous.
Yeah.
So forgive me for chuckling, but you know, that it's only because I live that life, you know, and I've lived it. But thank goodness I know where home is now, and basically I know that I never left.
Yeah. And in happiness or unhappiness are emotions, and they're not bad. And God is there through all of it because God is us and all of that. And if we really want to understand something, I have a Facebook page called the Oneness Spirit Guide. And I posted a documentary a little while ago, just yesterday.
It's good. I watched it.
To get an understanding of what we mean by oneness and the fact that we live in parallel universes and that we've all lived the lives of each other and it's all happened simultaneously, really recommend you watch it. This is a scientific fact that science itself is rebelling against. But there's wonderful people that are coming to this understanding. And this one fellow that was talking about, can you remember his name now? Everett.
Harvey, is it Harvey Everett, or is it
Harvey Everett or something of that nature? The fact that we don't know his name off the top of our heads is insane. This fellow brought and understand a truth that is amazing that the science world is not willing to accept right now. Way ahead of his time. By the way, he was an atheist. He came to this understanding through atheism. The oneness understanding permeates through all of life, and it's incredible. And he found a mathematical equation to prove it that science today is trying to grasp and rebelling against. And there's a reason for that, and maybe we'll get into that in our next video. But part of that reason is peace seems very odd to those that are not in it. And to me, peace is not just being in the neutral state although that's what it is. It's realizing that state isn't even in existence without everything else. I'm not striving to be in peace anymore. Peace is what we are, and that's it. And the experience of life is the reason. That's all. And when we find that, life becomes fascinating, amazing, and even the tragedies are not, so tragic, I guess. It sort of takes the edge off of everything, and but also brings excitement to everything as well. It's a beautiful truth. So I I hope that this I don't know what this did, but I know it did great things for me right now because I loved it. I love it. I love it. I love it. That's why I do it. I think Sharon does this because she loves it as well. I hope you do what you love, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Have a great day. Lots of love to you.